And so from a lending point of view, lenders will allow 10% of the contract price as a contingency, whether you like it or not.
You know, breaking it down, people are like, oh, I need money to do that project. It's bigger than that. Like there's so many pieces of the puzzle, right? Architectural fees and engineering fees and town planning fees, they add up. We all know that. That comes into cash flow, right? So there's a portion at the front there that, is it possible? Can people loan for those things? Welcome everybody again, hopefully. Episode 2. We're going to be talking everything about budgets and money and cash and finances. And I think today, like last episode and the future ones, we're going to have a special guest. And I think what better guest, special guest, than Tony Fornaro from Fornaro Group of Companies sitting with me today. And we're going to chew the fat about everything, and hopefully we're going to be able to help people understand what are the pathways to creating their projects. Now, Tony, a little bit of a quirky thing we have going on with these episodes. We're going to open up this vault door, and today it's your secrets and maybe some of mine that we're going to have a bit of a chat about. So can you reach over to that handle and give it a bit of a...
Just crank it?
With your strength, and just crank it open, and we'll open up. That's opened. So a little bit about Tony and our connection. I've known Tony now for about 10 years. I think we'll call it 10 years. We've worked on Tony and his lovely wife on their office fit out in the Valley, which they purchased a property and luckily came to us, and we were sort of blessed with creating your little home away from home. Not long after that, or probably at the same time, Tony started to talk to us about property they had here in Windsor. But look, Tony looks after all things financial with Base, with us, with Natalie and myself, with all of our finances. And I think for us, going back that 10 years, we've learnt a lot about finances and projects. And with that as well, we try to impart that knowledge onto our clients because we care about how that little piece of the puzzle can kind of help. So I wouldn't mind your take on that and a bit about Fornaro, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, the Fornaro Group of Companies, we've been around for 24 years, and we own an accounting firm, a mortgage broking business, and a property management business. So that keeps me off the streets, but it also gives me a very holistic view of anything to do with construction, finance, tax implications of it, if it's build for profit, and lots of things like that. Yeah. I'm looking forward to another project that we're going to do with Sean, maybe 2026.
Do I know about that yet?
Not yet.
Okay, cool. Excellent. So look, that's a little bit of an intro. We're going to jump into some nitty-gritty, I think, and we'll jump around a little bit, but I think in order to do that, it's a pretty sensitive topic, and I think we need to fill these little glasses with a little bit of red. What do you think, Laura? What have we got here today?
Sounds got good. A little Malbec from South Australia.
Nice.
Yep.
Sponsored by Baseically Speaking.
Baseically Speaking.
Excellent.
Looks good.
Does.
So, just going to give that a little
Thank you.
More.
So, Tony, from that intro, it just not dawned on me, but I think I just find, when I first started architecture, it's like, oh, great, we're going to do that, we're going to draw stuff, and that's it. But we soon find out, especially when you're delving into, as you touched on, whether it's, projects for profit or the emotions of it, we've got to find out what those synergies are so we can align partnerships or the team to create the projects, because it's not just about architecture. Like we have to navigate on the architectural side of things, a whole raft of things. But on other sides, there's the emotions of the mums and dads and the clients. But what about when they want to ask a little bit more? What about, I want to subdivide? You've got to start to dig into some legals and some financials and what are the titles? And that's where we start to, I guess, try to hinge some things off the likes of yourself and lawyers and not so much consultants, but another raft of people and knowledge that you need to have or to be able to talk to someone to procure those projects. And they trust us to kind of hopefully give them the steps. And part of it might be talking to, from a financial perspective, from a mortgage broking, to go, well, where do they comfortably sit, or what can they afford, and how do they navigate that? Because there's time and money, right, involved in that. And if you just jump in without all of the kind of chess pieces, it becomes a bit of a, you get to one pit and you go, oh, hang on, we should have applied for that, and now it's 90 days. So I think having, I guess, someone to lean on closely, and that may also be able to get some synergies, and maybe we can introduce people to you and you to us. That's great, but it's not the main thing. The main thing about this is so that when clients are coming to us, they have a bit of knowledge, and maybe they need to talk to their mortgage broker first to find out where they're positioning. Is that something that you come across a fair bit?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think the message really is you need a team of people in order to make the project successful. That's not just mortgage brokers or accountants, but also builders and engineers and architects, and lots of people come together to do it. You don't know what you don't know. Most people aren't involved in these industries, and so they need to seek the relevant advice. From a mortgage broking perspective, if you're borrowing money, you need to know how much you can borrow. If you're building, a luxury property, say north of $3 million, the rules change. So you may need to involve a quantity surveyor, you may need to involve other parties. But ultimately, we need to know how much you can borrow if you're borrowing money in order to help set those budgets, in order to know where you fall. There's no point falling in love with a design that Sean has completed and then it's outside of your budget. Okay, that creates problems later.
It most certainly does. And I think we can give the advice and we stand by it as well. And anytime we're a bit unsure about it, we want to avoid we don't want to be prying, we're not judging, but I think it's fair to ask, have you got things in order? Because you're doing it for the betterment of the project and the betterment of the flow and the process and the programming and all the bits we're going to talk about today. I think it just opens up for a massive discussion, and I don't believe that everybody knows not so much how easy it is, but there is a step-by-step process which does make it easier rather than it'll be right. Oh no, I spoke to my bank 6 months ago. It's very dangerous because you fall into a bit of a trap of not being able to unhear stuff. And it's pretty scary, isn't it? We will get into a little bit of, square metre rates and all those things. And we're all human. Like, we want to hear what we want to hear. So when we hear something that's not overly favourable, it sometimes can be a bit, feel like a bit of rejection. So look, that's a little bit of a longer intro. I've got a couple of points here. It's flowing on, but cost and cost management, right? So, if you're wanting the best result, I think having this conversation from the outset, right? We've sort of touched on that. So I want to ask you a few questions about, I guess, transparency and from a client's perspective, and how important it is to set a budget. And this is a little bit with maybe some knowledge already that you could have given someone, but also about what does that budget include? Now, I've got a couple of things written down here, which I want your opinion on because I'm often stumped by it. And there's more, but fees, architectural fees, consultants' fees, authority fees. Then there's construction costs, landscape, pools, fences, driveway, furniture, holidays. I often say to people, I don't mind if your budget includes a holiday, but I need to know it so I can pull out and then talk about construction. So in your opinion, like when you're delivering a news to someone, or what would you think about if someone said, well, what's your budget for this project?
Yeah, look, certainly all of those things, as you mentioned, they're all measurable usually. What is not measurable in my experience, though, is contingency. So such things like if they start to dig on your land and then they strike rock. Well, do we have a contingency for that? In my case, we have done 2 projects that ended up having asbestos in it, and so we had asbestos removal. Okay, so there's lots of things that you may not be aware of that can happen. And so from a lending point of view, lenders will allow 10% of the contract price as a contingency, whether you like it or not. It's generally what they do. I learnt, again, through my experience, certainly furniture is a thing. I didn't realise you had to buy all new furniture when you built a new house. But my wife has other ideas.
And she's got very good taste.
Of course, absolutely. there are things also, there may be running costs, of course. So you may also have other engineering that's not been accounted for because the engineer is unaware.
Yep.
Invariably, something will change during the project. You might say to the builder, move my barbecue from here to there. It's not free, so there's costs involved in doing that because they have to spend their time and expertise doing it.
Yeah. And look, there's conversations all the way along with that, right? And we've jumped into the construction side of I'm very interested in that, and we can call that all sorts of things, contingencies, there's latent conditions, and we want to talk to people about that because they do happen.
Absolutely.
You can control what you can control, and it is a bit of a dark art, but what we can document, we can get soils tests, we can do those things, and we can know quite well. But what about things like I look at this, and when someone says to me, okay, my budget for the project is $1 million, part of my initial brain goes, cool, you got $1 million to spend on the house. Now, the house doesn't include driveways, furniture, pools, fences, landscape, authority fees, consultant fees. So that's that D there, which is cool. Right, tick that one off. Now, and that's that. You talked about lending. That's primarily what they're looking at. So a question is, and we get often asked it because architectural fees and engineering fees and town planning fees, they add up. We all know that. That comes into cash flow, right? So there's a portion at the front there that, is it possible? Can people loan for those things? Can people borrow? I don't know if it's bridging or what. I'm interested.
Yeah. Look, the short answer is yes. It comes down to available equity in existing property, or it comes down to the valuation of the project. And so if the valuer values the project, including all of those fees, then absolutely there's equity there to use. So that's the short answer is yes.
And I guess before you get to be able to value a project, you need a design in sense, right? So
Absolutely.
There's a little bit of horse and cart, and which is understandable. There's no magic number, but it's education and trying to understand that from a fee perspective and all of the other components before we're actually digging in the dirt. There's checks and balances. I had a client the other day, and I love it when they ask these detailed questions like, hey, can you put a program together so I can look at my cash flow? It's music to my ears because they're considering it. Because then they can maybe take that to their mortgage broker and go, hey, this is what I'm looking at. How do I manage this? And everyone's different, right? We've just been getting asked it lately that how does that work? And I love it how people ask it because it means they're considering it. It's due diligence, it's thoughtful, it makes our process a lot easier.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I think it's a good idea.
It is. But you know what? When you first meet someone, you don't want to bombard them with that because they've come to you hopefully because they love your work, love your environment, there's a beautiful culture, there's all these really nice, warm, fuzzy things, which we do very well, but we want to make sure that we are also doing all the other bits really well, which we, hand on heart, say we do.
Yeah.
We do, we love it, we want to investigate it. But you got to have those conversations at the start, and we've done some really interesting things in surveying and getting people to fill some interactive things out. It gets them to open up. It's ice breaking. Because it's pretty daunting, or it can be. You're not so much for you because you're sort of pretty easygoing on those sort of things. But I appreciate that coming to a mortgage broker and coming to an architect, and even sometimes going to the dentist. I hate the dentist. Sorry, dentist. But it can be really intimidating environment. So our role is to give this calming, confidence, trusting. And if we can back that up with saying, look, I've got someone that you can speak to, or we use this engineer or that town planner, I think that, my opinion is that really helps. There's an explanation around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my view is we're not mortgage brokers or architects, we're problem solvers.
Absolutely.
Right. So the problem is I want a nice house or I want to design a house. Who's the guy who can do that?
Yeah. And there's a lot of machinations.
Yeah.
And this is what we're trying to cover off. And I think we'll probably only touch on the critical bits, right? So look, Tony, it's still on a bit of cost management, and there's a couple of other topics here. But before we go, what I know you're a wine connoisseur and actually a pretty, I think, a collector of champagnes. Really.
Champagnes and red wines. Yes.
Yeah.
Will
it get you back here?
Absolutely. Okay. Look, it's from South Australia. It's pretty hard to get anything bad from that part of the country.
Cool. Oh, well, I don't even need any more. That's great. So affordability, okay. Has there been input from brokers? what costs can be supported, what typically do mortgage brokers want to see regarding the project, and I don't even know if it's a word, comfortability to afford. Now that's the cash flow. So what advice do you give to people if they've come to see you about ticking some boxes there?
Yeah, well, look, we start with what are they trying to achieve, right? And so it's all about the goal at the end of the day. Then we would check, do they have the capacity in order to borrow enough money to do what they want to do? Mm-hmm. Different lenders lend different amounts, and so perhaps their current lender wouldn't entertain it, but a different lender might. Then there's a conversation around, well, are you comfortable? And so whilst they may be able to borrow a certain amount of money, they might not be comfortable borrowing that. Yeah. And the short answer is, if you're not comfortable, you should not do it.
Gut feels a little bit?
My experience says people will achieve the goal over their personal comfort. That old adage, they'll bite off more than they can chew and chew like crazy. That's what we see.
Yeah. But you'd cover that and I say that, it's a bit of a leading question. There's a risk analysis, right? And there's where do your surveys of me or someone else is about where your level sits on a bit of paper, right?
Well, it's very highly legislated, the industry. And so when a lender looks at how much you can borrow, they add 3% to your interest rate as a buffer, right? So in the middle of all of this, there's a 3% buffer. Yeah. So the buffer interest rate at the moment is around 9.2%. Right. On top of that, they also have minimum living costs, and we'd run an analysis on your living costs. Mm-hmm. And so there's a conversation around living costs. Again, typically the conversation is you're spending too much money. In order to do what you want to do, you need to reduce your living costs, which people agree to.
And these things can change over even time though. Like we're talking about a project that, like take yours for example, without getting to the nitty gritty and some things we explored, but you're talking a handful of years. Now, in that period of time, without digging into COVID and all sorts of things, and rates and material costs and all those sort of things. So it's important as well that the communication with clients looking to get some money, that they've got like some goals in plan, some plan A, B, C, D, what if interest rates goes up? And there's advice obviously on fixing things and variable and those sort of things as well.
Yeah. Part of our methodology, so with our clients, we send through a methodology, which is how did we arrive at this particular loan lender interest rate? Yep. And there's often a conversation around fixing versus not fixing. What are the predictions in the market? So all of that is analysed and provided.
And as you say, it's quite legislated, right? And for good measure.
Yeah, like for sure.
It keeps everyone in check and so forth and stops that human error of biting off too much, right? We all do it. Yeah. So what I'm taking out of that though is the personal kind of connection to a broker such as yourself or in that industry, you're going to uncover a bit more than just going to the big four, so to speak.
Yeah, well, look, it's
like directly.
Probably the biggest thing, the lenders essentially have to follow the same process, again, because of the tight legislation. But what you get is you get a person who's incentivised to make profit for the bank that they're working for. Yep. Whereas I'm incentivised to get my client the best deal, what they want. Yeah. So that's one of the large differences.
So it's more personal.
Absolutely. Look, the other things are if you go to one lender, you'll get that guy's product because they're not going to tell you to go down the road and get someone different, are they?
Because they're locked into them. Is that how they work?
Well, because it's the only thing they can offer.
Yeah, of course.
That's it.
Yeah. Whereas you're sort of, you've got your fingers out there in all of the different sums. And I know even when we talk about, insurances, there's often it's that constant revisiting it. Is that fair to say? Like your finances generally?
We review every 2 years. Yeah. And things usually change enough in the market or people's circumstances change to warrant a new recommendation.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not always, but usually. Yeah.
Well, even look at the last 10 years, there's been a lot of things that have been happening. I mean, so understanding the costs, okay, we often hear we'll work the budget out later. It's pretty dangerous, isn't it? For so many reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to work it out later, generally there'll be more that you'll spend, or there'll be no contingency left. Yep. Lenders won't really let you do that either. So if you're borrowing money, what they like to see is a fixed price contract with everything factored into it, so there's no surprises. It is possible to do cost plus contracts, particularly on larger builds.
Yep.
And that's better for the client because if the builder and the client work together, there's usually a better result on a cost plus.
And it's case by case, isn't it?
Of course.
Whether it's commercial, residential, different lending. So that's probably breaking it down. People are like, oh, I need money to do that project. It's bigger than that. Like there's so many pieces of the puzzle, right?
Well, is it just one project, or do you want to do 3 in a row, or you know, you have to look into the future and say, well, it's not just this thing, or if it is, fine, but usually there's more than one.
Yeah, and therein lay its strategy. Projects are long. I feel that if you get a relationship with someone like yourself, that you can just keep going, then it makes sense because you're not reinventing wheels and you're not uncovering stuff again. It's just, oh, want to do that, want to do that, want to do that. So that can be within a project or multiple projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Do you reckon that just people in general are a bit scared to talk about money?
I would say Australians, as a rule, don't like to talk about money. They're
different environments, of course. Like you're out at the pub, you're probably not going to be you don't want to be telling people what you're on and those sort of things. But my point is that when we try to get people through our doors, I don't want to be, spruiking it to the world, but the more we understand about people, and I'd imagine it's the same with you, the better result they'll get because we can tailor things and fashion things. If things are being held back about even what the budget includes, don't worry about it. I want to worry about it because it's a reflection. If we get to the end of a project where we're trying to sign a contract and it's more than what you want, what's happened? Is it a little bit of us? Is it a little bit of what you've heard? Is it industry? And I think it's a bit of everything, I'll be honest. I think we always are trying to better that, hence why we're talking to you.
I think it comes back to one of the initial comments. It's about a team, and you can't get the best result if you're not involving your team in all of the components of what's happening. Like when we built, the builder gave us free access to the property. He basically shared everything with us. Really good experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, and that is what you want at that point. You'd like to think when you get that contract signed, all of the dots, every I's been dotted, every T's been crossed, but there's still more. Like there's still the navigation of a build, which is important. We love to be involved in it, and I think banks and wherever the money's coming from, they want to know what they're paying for as well, right?
They get a valuation done at every draw. Usually speaking,
so at different levels, right? Like if you're over and above a certain amount loan.
No, generally it's like every time money is to be paid, they either get a valuation, which is a guy driving past, or they will have the client sign off to say the work has been done.
We've had
typically valuations.
Yeah, and I think they're important, but we've had situations where as architects we can write a progress certificate under the contract as a superintendent that quantifies the works that have been done. There's a few boxes to tick and lenders will want that. But I've had a few situations, and I won't name the Big Four bank, but they were like, well, that client, yes, we need that, but we also want our guy to do it at $2,000 a drawdown. Yeah. And I start to think, that's added cost again, which is unfair a little bit, but I sort of get it, but you sort of feels like it's a bit double dipping,
Yeah, and that's often the case. So one lender won't use another lender's valuation, even if it's the same firm, right? So they generally just order their own. You can avoid that drawdown cost too, by the way.
Yeah, and it's a negotiation, right? Everything's negotiable.
Yeah.
So that's understanding some cost. I'm going to jump into setting a project program, right? Now I've talked here about, from our perspective, things happen along the way. Babies, anniversaries, deaths, jobs change, all those sort of things. I think from a lending perspective, they'd want to know some of those things as well as to how's that going to affect things? And you can't predict it, but...
Do you know, strangely, they don't. So they essentially draw a line in the sand when they approve or settle the loan. And as long as the work is done in line with the contract, they don't ever come back and ask that question.
Wow. See, I didn't know that. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because you sort of feel like, imagine if you lost your job and you think, do I have to go tell them and then they just repossess everything, or do I just keep marching through? I guess if you're still somehow making your payments.
Yeah, as long as the payments are made and you're not in breach of the contract, then they just play on.
That makes sense. Yeah. So sites often can promote many options and opportunities like yours. And I say that like a certain size home and you could subdivide, you could do this. They're the things I think that are really important to investigate, which we did at length. But I think that what I'm trying to get to there is about setting milestones for projects, and a lot of it will be to do with lending. I think they all knit together. You don't just deal with it at the end. It's a conversation along the way, whether we're talking sketch design or the budget. And I think that's a combination that often should always be talked about.
Yeah, it's interconnected, the whole process. Yeah.
So what milestones do you think that would be important? I'm just going to put a question mark at the end of that, and not just say about finance, but about a project. And I know just a general project.
Yeah, for sure. So look, from my point of view, first of all, is it an owner-occupied property or is it for profit? So if it's for profit, let's have a look at the tax structure first. Yep. Because if you put the property in the wrong name, you could end up paying a lot more tax than you would otherwise have to pay.
Yep.
What's the time frame of the project can influence that as well. The next thing I would do is look at the finance. Can you borrow enough money to do what you want to do now and in the future so that there's no surprises later?
Yeah.
Then we'd look at what documentation is available. So are the plans completed? Have they been certified? Has the builder been engaged? What sort of contract has the builder got? So in my mind, these are all milestones. All before any work happens.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say, and you hadn't been scripted.
Nailed it. Yeah, awesome. Wasn't even looking.
So I think there's implications as well about even from a CGT perspective.
Yeah.
And then times of the year as well. Like, do you spend money on things up to a certain time? Is it better? And I think it's probably. For different people, it's different as well, right, in their circumstances.
Absolutely. It's highly individualised. There's also an asset protection structure that you might like to employ as well. So it might be an owner-occupied.
Like an insurance against sort of thing?
No. So so in my case, I don't own any assets at all, nothing. Everything is owned by Annie.
Yep.
Because if I get sued, I'm worth nothing.
Yeah.
So that's
never say that about yourself.
That is a asset protection mechanism.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, look, all super valid, and I think the program is a bigger beast, right? It's design, it's money, it's construction, and it's all of those things. And this series is about trying to dabble into all of those. So I guess from our perspective, we want to make sure that things are affordable. They've got all of their ducks in a row, and that is part of it. So that's from the money side of things. What about? It's probably stuff you don't give advice on, but I'm going to test you on it. Applying budget to project design. So from our perspective, it is a bit of a dark art, but there's a lot of precedents and there's history, there's square metre rates, there's gut feels, and I think that's valid. General design and construction methodology, and I think even on yours, we went from a renovation of a lightweight home with all bits and pieces to a bit more suspended concrete.
Yeah.
And at the time, we've got to be able to also then engage with builders and the like to start to go, hey, we're thinking about this. What sort of rates are we talking about? And it comes back a little bit to the first points about construction costs, landscape, pools, fences. And we've now developed something which we feel works quite well. You have a box and it's the inside of the home and you've gauged the construction methodology. So we apply a rate to that, which we are comfortable that it's within a ballpark, right?
Yeah.
But then it's all the bits around, and we touched on them, and some of them you deal like coalface on, but there's driveways and fences, and the square metre rate at some point in a project becomes a little bit disjointed, because you've got to, if you get at the end of the project and it's $1 million, and the home's 300 square metres, you go, oh, it's X dollars a square metre. But hang on, we had a $70,000 pool and we had $50,000 worth of landscape. We had a fence, so that's not real square metre. So it is a bit, but we have to start there, because when someone says, when we drill it down and they say, right, we have, for that box, we've got X dollars. I have to go divide that by the number at the time. And I'm going to be careful not to say what the numbers are, because it's...
it depends on the fit.
It's the ever-changing thing, right? And we don't 100% know it. If we pick a tap, we don't know that that's 100% going to be in there. So you got to go out enough to come back. And I think in going out, we're chiming in with some builders and we're chiming in with some engineers, and it's okay to chime in with your finances again as well. Oh, is that okay? We're now on our standard set of drawings up in the top, we'll have a table of areas and what we feel is an appropriate amount of money to be spending per square metre. But it's all information. Now, some people don't like, they don't see the table because there's all these other pretty things to look at.
Of course.
We put it on there not as us covering, we're putting it on for information. But we've found now we can sort of axonometric, like blow out a building and put some dollars to that, and then they're reading it a little bit more and then, oh, what about that? So you get the conversation straight away because you can go 10 steps forward, come back a bit. Oh, do we need to talk to our broker again? Come back, go out again, come back. And I think that iterative process, in my opinion, is really good because the other way to do it, start here. I've got $1 million. All right, see you later. Go see your broker. We're going to march all the way through, get all the fees along the way, consultants, da-da-da. Oh dear, look at that. Nasty. It's a horrible way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What I learned throughout the process was the box, the house that you're building, you can apply the square metre rate to because essentially you know how large it is, you know construction costs, and you know the fit out of the property. And then the allowance for the other items would be, I call them prime cost items. You know a driveway is going to cost X, you know a fence is going to cost Y. And so really when setting the project budget, I feel that you would have both of those things in there. One thing I learned, I would involve the builder earlier.
Yes, well, that was one of my questions.
There you go. Yeah. I would definitely bring him in and say, here's our plans, here's all the stuff we want. What do you think? But before the plans are finished,
it's buy-in.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask a question here because it's popping up a bit, and I'm on board with it because quantity surveyors, and absolutely no disrespect to them, but most of the times there's not a vested interest in that dollar. And I use the example of that wine glass might be $2. If I'm a quantity surveyor, I'm going, I'm just going to call it $2.20 just in case, and there's 50 of them. And they do that with every item, and there's no disrespect, this is how I feel. Then you get to the end and then they add another 10%. So you're getting a number which I can do, and a lot of other people, theirs is going to be a lot better, but there's no vested interest for them to get a number to make a builder get the job or not get the job. It's a real slippery slope.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you said it because, for instance, I won't mention names, but your builder loves getting involved early because they can have a bit of a buy-in on the design of the constructability, and they can actually be part of that team again. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, that's time they put in. Now, I try to sell that to clients to say it's really valuable. Now, they might want to charge for that. I think it's okay. Like, you're going to pay for a quantity surveyor maybe $5 or $10 grand. A builder might charge $3,000 at a prelim stage. Let's call that maybe a third the way through the project. That's really valuable because we're getting our take on it. We're getting buy-in from a builder who may want to build it. We've actually got some really cool builders they'll say, look, we can't do this home until the end of next year, but I'm happy to help you out. And that's smart. That's thinking about the business, staying in our house and those sorts of things as well. But we've got to be really careful that it's a really horrible, nasty word, colluding. It's a dangerous thing, and I'm not saying it happens in the industry, but I don't ever want to be part of that. And to introduce a builder to help the project, it is to help the project. It's not to help. It's not no kickbacks. The kickback I get is that I get a really awesome builder that I've worked with before, and I know how they work. They know how I work. They know what they can do. They know how to price things, and lo and behold, they're pricing it in their house. So it's not, does that make sense?
Yeah. Look, I take the view that we're all professionals. We've all been in business a long time. And the suggestion of any potential colluding is just ridiculous. You wouldn't have the privilege of being in business for 24 years if you weren't looking after your
100%.
clients.
Yes.
End of story, right? So it wouldn't even cross my mind.
Good. No, it's... and I try to put myself a lot of the times in the client's shoes going, well, if I'm getting that advice, does it feel like they're pushing a barrow sort of thing? So there's timing and there's confidence and trust in that.
Look, there's maybe one comment I could add, and that is, well, how many builders are we seeing at the start, right? So if it's a builder, if I was a new client, I'd say, well, are there any others I can talk to?
Yeah, true.
So I'd probably want 2 or 3.
Yeah. So, and do you reckon even at that prelim stage? Like, and even, let's say they wanted to charge $3,000 and you're prepared to pay $9,000, lots of 3.
Yeah.
And the builders knew that. I think that's fair and reasonable.
I think that's okay. Yeah, like people like to be paid for their time.
Yeah, I agree. And at that point, if they come back and it's like, oh, it's 20% over the budget, and when I say the budget, we've talked about that, right? That's then when we can go, awesome, because we can come back a few steps at no charge, like, because that's part of the process. But I'd rather go 10 forward, 3 back, 10 forward, 3 back, rather than go all the way to the end. And I've done it before, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that's no good.
This is our 20th year, right? And I've done that in our early years, thinking I was doing the right thing. All I have to do is go back and fix it at my cost. So I'm not a fan of doing it. So I just think we're just trying to get the processes better and better and better. Yeah. And the builders are now, when I say now, I think they're well in their rights to say, look, it's going to take me 2.5 weeks. Can I cover some costs? That I just wanted to get your opinion, both as a client, as a person, as a financial, you're in your position.
Yeah, so you'd probably do something like pay for the costs, but if people end up contracting, take that off the cost of the contract.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's.
And if the other guy misses out, well, he gets his $3,000.
Yep. No, I think that's fair enough. So we talked about quantity surveyor, the advantages of getting a builder on board. And paying what I'd call it sounds weird, but the no obligation fee, but they're getting paid to do that. Reverse engineering is another one. You get the box, you get the budget, you reverse engineer it, and you try to chop it up like that. So I think you've got to do all of them. There's no magic shallot, there's not one silver bullet for it all. And experience as well. I think that comes with certain clients and their connections and us, and it's a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to get you to lock that door in a second, and you've enjoyed the wine, I think. We are going to pull up stumps, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Great chatting with you.
It's awesome. We'll get a photo in a second, but...
if you have any questions from any of your viewers, specifically related to anything that I deal with, send them through. I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, that would be it. And it'll be interesting. I'm hoping we're going to get a lot of feedback, as in even just naming this. We were having some nice feedback, which is great. So anyone who is interested can contact me or Tony. Tony, do you want to give some info?
Yeah, simply, so we're in the Valley. It's just Fornaro, fornaro.com.au. Or if you just Google Tony Fornaro, it'll come up.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Now you can shut it. Perfect.
Done.